All right, so I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a faux crack in the face, and I'm kind of winging this, so bear with me. But if you come over to the left-hand side, you're going to find that there's a polygonal lasso tool. Thinking about math, thinking about polygons, that's where they come up with the name polygonal. It's sort of multi-edged. They go in straight lines. So what I would do is I would click to capture pretty much straight lines and angles. So let's say that happens to be, let's say that's it. Let's do it right over here. And I'm just going to kind of click around, and then I get close to it. You see that little circle pop up? It's gone. Now it's there. That's saying I'm close enough for it to end the shape when I click, and I got that selection. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and Control J, and what I just did was I then copied that to its own layer. Okay? So I didn't actually do anything to the bottom. Bottom is still completely intact. All right? Now, if I go to that layer, I'm on my Move tool. If I go to that layer and I move it, you're going to see I'm able to separate that. But I can also, let me line that back up, I can also Control to your Edit Free Transform, and I can like rotate it just a tiny bit, and then maybe move it away. And it may not look like I did that much, but when I go to the next, you might see a little bit more of an effect. You see that it's got a little skip in it? Those are things I would probably edit later on. So I'll show you some of those things in a minute. But if I go ahead and I click right here on this blue, I just double click. I'm going to come to my layer style palette. I can also get it from up inside layers. I am going to, you can do a couple of things. First of all, you can bevel and emboss. But what's going to happen is it's also going to bevel and emboss that edge, which I don't want to do. I can drop shadow it, which again, I'm going to have a problem because I'm drop shadowing out over here. But that's actually looking pretty cool. Click on the word and the center menu will change. So that's kind of important. I could come through and I could increase that. And give a little bit more. You can see it looks a little bit more crack-like. Okay? So that's an option. I'm just going to say okay to that one. But I want to show you a couple ways of doing it. I'm going to turn off the effect on that one. All right. So with this one, I'm going to call that airbrush under. So if I airbrush on a layer underneath it, I can go here to my brush. I'm going to make sure it's on black. Oops. Make sure it's on black. And I'm going to make sure it's a soft edge brush. I don't want a huge brush either. But what I can do, make sure that's underneath my airbrush under. What I can do is I can, oh, not good. Forgot to do that. There we go. I can come right to that edge and sort of almost trace around. There are more elegant ways of doing that in terms of working with opacity so you can see where it's at. But now I can come back with the eraser. I'm going to soften up that eraser quite a bit. And I'm going to come through here and I'm going to reduce that in some areas. I have my finger on the bracket key, so I'm changing the size. If you don't see me changing the size on here, it's because I'm doing it on my keyboard. If you're not using the bracket keys to change your size, you are not working very efficiently at all. Notice I'm changing out the size of that brush to try to make some changes. So basically, I can then take and I can sort of blend that in. I can then come up to my airbrush under layer, and I can actually erase. Of course, I'm going to want to harden that brush because I don't want it to be a fuzzy edge there. But I can erase after, of course, zooming in. Terrible quality picture. But I can erase some of those things that I don't want to keep a hard edge on, like right here. I'm actually going to soften that brush and erase it a little bit. Just a little bit, just to soften the jawline so it really kind of blends in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead up here, check out that hairline. Looks pretty good. I might come over here and sort of disguise that just a little bit. Move around, take a look at it, see what needs help. And part of his face looks like it's almost cracking. Okay? Now, that was with a layer underneath of just shadow. That's what the shadow looks like. That's with an area of just shadow underneath. So notice this is the shadow. And then this is the piece of face that covers it. Okay? Now what I did here was I put that layer style. And of course I've got that drop shadow on there. but I don't want to drop shadow over here. So if I were to do it in that way, I would need to what's called convert to a smart object, which smashes that effect onto my layer. And then I'm going to right click and then rasterize it. And once I've rasterized that layer, I can now go ahead and nibble away with this eraser. And I can get rid of the edges that I don't want to see any longer. I'm going to get really small and get into here and try to blend that back a little bit more so again we don't see it. But that will only work if your background matches. So if this background was really busy and it had like a street scene, you would see like weird duplicates of people in the background. You probably would not be very successful. So that's why I showed you two ways. This method is very successful with a plain background that's easily changed. You can see that I just blended that right in right there. And you can really see that happening. But again, those are the two ways. And this one was I needed to smart and rasterize in order to smash that effect onto there. So those are two ways to just kind of put a little bit of a crack into something. Depending on where you put it, it could be that you want to just segment the eye. Maybe it's a close-up where you're making the eye look like it's all cracked. Whatever it might be. It's just kind of an interesting way to attack this. There are plenty more ways of doing this, please understand. If you have another way, I'd love to see it. Tons and tons of ways to attack this particular one. But these are just two ways that you might find helpful.